All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to First Term. I appreciate everybody coming back and listening to me. I know we've been on a little bit of a hiatus. I think, the frequency at which we do this podcast is going to change just kind of based on what's going on in government. If there's new current events, if there isn't, as opposed to just, kind of coming in and talking about everything that just happened, a week prior. So we're flirting with figuring out the timing exactly. But anyway, since the last podcast, there's been a lot that's gone on from the Minnesota fiasco. I more so mean the, when I say fiasco, I mean the cover-ups, the Somali takeover, things like that. And then obviously the Minneapolis, what's going on in Minneapolis with ICE, what went on in Venezuela recently, Nigeria, Cuba, things like that. So we'll start off with a couple videos. I'm going to show this first video based on what's going on in Minnesota right now is crazy in terms of the fraud and healthcare schemes that are going on there. There's been plenty of coverage on it recently, which there hadn't been for a really long time. It kind of forced Tim Walz to step down permanently, and he will not be running for re-election. And it's causing a lot of turmoil kind of all over Minnesota with the amount of illegal Somali immigrants that are taking over and doing things there, and then the amount of healthcare fraud and a lot of just misappropriated funding. So we'll start with this first video and go from there. So recently, Minnesota decided to change their state flag from the typical Minnesota flag that has been the flag of the state for years. You can kind of see it in the background of this video. And I am going to press play and you can see the new flag in Minnesota. Chilling stuff for sure.
Minnesota flag.
I mean, this is pretty crazy.
There, that's better. If this isn't treason, what is?
So it's crazy. That's video number one. I don't even have words for it. I mean, you can kind of see how direct that is. That's just crazy to me. I remember when I saw that video, a couple of my friends shared it with me, and I couldn't believe that was a real thing. But as you can see, there's a pretty clear tie there. Whether directly, indirectly, I can't imagine it would be indirectly. But the Somali takeover in Minnesota has been something that's been, there's been whisperings about it for quite some time now. The amount of Somali immigrants that are flooding into Minnesota are at record levels that we have never seen in the United States before. And so it begs the question of what's changed there. And there's a lot of fraud. There's a lot of medical fraud. There's a lot of people are moving to Minnesota and opening these clinics, these medical clinics, these child care clinics, and they're making millions of dollars from the government for it. And nobody really knows why, what the justification is. It's a big mystery. And so the Somali government and a lot of people in Somalia are moving to Minnesota specifically, opening these healthcare clinics and getting paid millions and millions of dollars from the government to open and run these places. It's one of the biggest fraud schemes, I think, in American history. And it's something that is not covered by the media nearly enough. So there's a investigator, Nick Shirley. He's not much older than me. I think 28, maybe 29. And he kind of goes around and he's investigating these so-called healthcare clinics and childcare clinics. And just the amount of fraud and neglect there is crazy. So I'm going to share two more videos.
Where are the children? It says you have 102 children here, and you got $2.66 million this year in
That's
funding.
Nick Shirley on the left-hand side over
And
here.
$2.5 million last year. We're just wondering where the kids are.
My name's Nick Shirley.
Nick Shirley.
Oh, we are from ourselves.
Yeah.
Hello, we'd like to ask where the money's going. Look at that. Shut us down. Where are the children at? No children inside of this daycare center. And look, this daycare center right here, no children inside of this daycare center. But between those buildings, over $2.6 million.
Pretty crazy stuff there. Again, that's another thing that's very hard to make up. So they went to childcare facility on, I think it was a Thursday morning, and there were no kids there. I don't know how you justify that. Wasn't a holiday, wasn't a weekend, wasn't anything. They showed up to 2 daycare facilities and they showed you one and then the one across from it, and there were no children there. So both of these places have gotten over $2 million in funding over the past year. And Nick Shirley and his private investigator are just like, dude, where are these kids? What's going on here? And you can see that the teachers, number one, foreign, which is fine, but it's a little troubling when you think about just the kind of pattern of neglect that I'm talking about, and abuse. It's a crazy thing. So I have a last video here that continues to go on, and it kind of links back to some of these daycare or childcare facilities that when Nick Shirley or any kind of citizen called these places, this is kind of who answered, and it was a very troubling thing in my opinion. So let me share that.
Because everything that he is uncovering in the state of Minnesota is mind-blowing when you go down that rabbit hole. And the video you're about to watch should concern you. Watch this.
So I was watching the most recent video by Nick Shirley exposing these daycare centers. Now, they're going daycare to daycare, and the next one that they go to is called Sweet Angel Childcare. This is where they show up to. And this is the business right here. Sweet Angel Childcare in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Now, listen to where this phone number goes to when you call this childcare center. Just wait for it.
Thank you for contacting the office of Governor Tim Walz and Lieutenant Governor Maggie Flynn.
Absolutely crazy stuff. I mean, you really can't make that kind of stuff up. I don't know how else to explain it other than the neglect that went on there. It was so crazy that things like this are occurring or continue to occur in our country. This was something that I guess had gone on for years and was just not talked about, not uncovered. And then thanks to journalists like Nick Shirley and a lot of local journalists within the state of Minnesota and Minneapolis, brought this to public attention, so much so that it started to gain national traction. Now, when I first looked up these videos and I first started seeing this on social media and things like that, it wasn't something that the news was covering at all. And so my question was, why is there no accountability going on? Why is 65% of healthcare and Medicare money gone in the state of Minneapolis or in the city of Minneapolis and Minnesota? It's just something that you can't make up. And it's something that was so disgusting that it then, when it started to gain national attention, then people finally decided to do something about it. And Tim Walz stepped down, Jacob Fry and a bunch of other city officials decided to take a step back and say, you know what, there was fraud, there was stuff that went on here. But the fact that it took this long to get people to admit to it, and the fact that something like this was happening, is crazy. Now that the fraud in Minnesota is behind us, President Trump and the Trump administration have now decided to turn their attention to the state of California. And I guarantee you that if we put a magnifying glass on the homelessness and affordable housing and different things, and the transportation money also in the state of California, we're going to uncover the same truly horrific things that happen in Minnesota. And I think this is a big reason why Gavin Newsom's running for president. I think, I think he thinks he can make the country better. And I think that he thinks that him running for president is a good thing. I'm not discouraging that. But I think that a large part of it is that he's realizing that if we start to put magnifying glasses on the state, putting a magnifying glass on the state of California and the way that things have been run over the past, 10 years, 10 years, we're going to start uncovering things that could jeopardize Gavin Newsom politically and also personally in terms of, hey, is he going to have to resign? Hey, should he be charged with crimes? My argument is that Tim Walz and a bunch of people in the state of Minnesota should go to prison for the amount of money and abuse and fraud that they've done. I think there's plenty of people in Minnesota that aren't able to afford healthcare. They are having to pay out of pocket now for healthcare expenses, for hospital visits, for things like that their insurance companies should have taken care of, or the government programs that they were affiliated with for healthcare should have taken care of, but weren't. All because of this fraud and abuse. It's terrible. And I think California, when the attention is turned to the state of California, it's going to be just as bad, if not worse. And I think Newsom running for president is a way for him to say, you know what, I'm getting out from California. I'm trying to focus on the country now and things like that. And it's just a scary thing. It's a scary thing that's happening in our country. And I don't know how we monitor it closer, but I think that there's a way to have a little bit more government oversight in terms of, not government oversight in that each state should be controlled all through a federal government system, but I think federal government should have eyes on each state sooner rather than later, so that things like these don't fester out and negatively affect people within their states. So that covers the fraud portion that I wanted to talk about. I want to talk about now something that also is not gaining nearly enough traction in the media. It's what's happening in Nigeria right now. For those of you that have no idea what I'm talking about, it's because our news sucks. Our news decides to cover flashy things. It decides to cover things that spark controversy, or things that attack Trump, or things that attack one side or the other, or horrible atrocities. And this is a horrible atrocity that I could not believe that national news was not covering. But look, I'm not a Christian, but in Nigeria, they are systematically killing Christians. Since 2009, they've killed over 100,000 Christians, and they've burned nearly 18,000 churches. That's crazy. That's genocide on a level that we have not seen in decades, maybe since the Armenian genocide and crazy things like that. And these are all attempts by Islamic terrorists to make sure that there is no anti-government propaganda, to make sure that they can take over the state, that it can become a Muslim Islamist country, as opposed to the majority Christian population that they had in Nigeria. The crazy part to me is that, kids were so quick to protest what was going on in Palestine, and the Palestine-Israel conflict. Yet we're not seeing any protesters for what's going on in Nigeria. There's no Christian protests. There's no pro-Christian protests, anti-Christian protests, pro-Nigeria. Nobody's asking for the United States to divest their interests from Nigeria. We probably should be. But it's something that the Trump administration's talked about a couple of times, and it's something they're monitoring very closely. But I've seen very little calls for action. I've seen very little news coverage. And it's crazy. Wiping out an entire religious group from a state or from a country is terrible. It's a horrible thing. And it's something that we should all be up in arms and alerted about, because if this can happen in Nigeria, it can happen anywhere. And if we let things like this happen, what does that say about our administration? What does it say about our country? And what does it say about us as people? It's just a very concerning thing that not a lot of people are covering. And so I would like to take, the 5 minutes that I just took to explain to you what's happening, to kind of raise, to kind of raise some interest for you, so that you can go look it up. You can go search news articles, because it is a very real thing, and it is something that is happening right now. Okay. The next thing I wanted to talk about. So on our last podcast, I talked a little bit about the drone strikes that were happening in Venezuela for the drugs that were being smuggled from Venezuela out of the country to Cuba, to the US, different places like that. Now, on my last podcast, I said that I didn't really want to get into it very much. But since then, a lot has escalated. As I'm sure a lot of you know, Nicolas Maduro, who was the dictator, so to speak, in Venezuela, was captured by the United States in one of the single greatest military operations maybe since the Obama administration went in and took out Osama bin Laden. I think it was an amazing thing the military did to make sure that there were no injuries to any U.S. troops. There were no full-scale invasion. There was no troops on the ground. We were able to go pick him up and withdraw him from a country that, is a great and beautiful country. But if you can withdraw evil people from an administration, the hope was that it would, recover nicely and would then become maybe a democratic country, which would be great for the United States to be able to do business with Venezuela. They have a lot of, they're a very rich oil population there, and oil, a lot of oil that can benefit the U.S. in terms of gas prices, in terms of, gas prices throughout Latin America would just improve, I think. And so it was something that they did that I didn't expect. I don't think a lot of us expected it to go that way. I know that there was a lot of speculation possibly of us invading Venezuela, and this was a way to avoid that. Now, since capturing Maduro and holding him in the United States and trying him as a criminal there, a lot of things have changed in that country, but not as many as I think that we thought. I think that the leadership there has been scrambled, so it's changed a lot. And there still is not a one particular leader in power there. And until there is, I don't know how much their base of operations in terms of how the country runs itself. I don't know how quickly it's going to change. But the eventual goal would be that we would like to see Venezuela become a democratic nation, just like we would like to see Cuba become a democratic nation. Cuba has for years been a communist dictatorship, and it is becoming increasingly dangerous in terms of their ties to Iran, their ties to crime, their ties to terrorism. And I think that if we can see Venezuela become democratic and we can start to put pressure on the citizens of Cuba to rise up and try to get rid of the communist dictatorship there, because Cuba and Venezuela for a long time have been very intermingled in that they rely on each other. They rely on each other for the drug trade. They rely on each other for the dictatorship that they have both created. And now, so one of the links is weakened and falling. You would hope that the other one would say, okay, we can't survive on our own anymore, and we're gonna maybe look at change, and the citizens will be unhappy and speak up and rise up and hope to change things. Because if Cuba becomes a democratic country, that's great for the United States. That's great for the world, honestly. But we're seeing glimpses of China and Russia maybe try to come in and save Cuba. And that can also be, that's a scary thing, because as we know, the biggest threats to the United States right now, Iran I put number one, but Iran, China, and Russia, because of their military capabilities and the sheer size of those countries, and the fact that they are the two largest countries with communist governments in the world. And it's a very dangerous thing for the United States and for the rest of the world if China and Russia are going to come in and try to save these smaller communist countries from becoming democracies. And so that's the struggle I think we're seeing right now. It's the biggest struggle I think we're seeing across the globe right now in terms of international relations side of things. Now, if we focus on what's going on in our own country, because a lot of bad things have been happening. As you know, I'm sure several of you know what's going on in Minneapolis with the shooting of Renee Good and the shooting and killing of Alex Preddy. These are two U.S. citizens, and U.S. citizens should never, ever, under any circumstance, unless they are criminals, unless they are doing terrible things for our country. I do not think that U.S. citizens should ever be injured or killed by our government. That's just not right. There's no way to cut it. That's not something that should be happening. Now, I understand there's a lot of opinions and sides to the story with those two shootings. I will not give an opinion. I don't feel like that's my place to give. I will say that I think killing of any human being, especially U.S. citizens, is wrong. Now, when we look outward to other countries and we look at countries or terrorists or dictators, those kinds of people that want to bring harm to mass groups of people. That's a different story. But I'm talking about U.S. citizens that are just going about their lives. I do not think that it's right. However, I will say that if you want to protest what ICE is doing, and ICE officers don't assault officers, don't dox them, or worse. The reason why these ICE raids and things are happening so poorly in Minnesota is because the state itself is being uncooperative in assisting ICE with their investigations. Meaning that, these sanctuary cities are the ones where we're seeing the most violence happening in terms of immigration and by ICE officers and citizens in these sanctuary cities. I understand the push to want to get ICE off the streets, to want to not see it, but then cooperate with the ICE investigations. Now, the crazy thing is that, the Trump administration never really had clear guidelines and a clear message to the public with why they're going to do things the way that they're doing. I think that there should have been a clear message like, hey, we are here to get criminals off the streets and to make our streets safer and America safer. And I think that that's something that the Trump administration, that Donald Trump basically won the election stating and holding to, is that we are going to clean up the streets. We do not want American citizens being killed by illegal immigrants in our country. But since then, it's strayed so far away from that path and that message that there is a lack of centralized messages. And so ICE and immigration and stuff has become the single most divisive factor in our country and in American politics right now. And I think it's because there was a lack of messaging. There was a lack of cooperation from multiple states. So sanctuary cities, normally they allow ICE to come into their jails or police arrest people and put them in their jails. The local law enforcement will communicate with ICE and say, hey, come into our jails, take these criminals, deport them. It makes it easier for law enforcement to work together with DHS and ICE to make sure things are civil and are working in a practicality sense, and that they are all working in the right direction under one clear message. That happened in 2012 with the Obama administration. They deported almost 400,000 illegal immigrants from the United States. And that's something that nobody really knew about. And you want to know why nobody really knew about it? Because every single state at the time, every local law enforcement in these states, federal law enforcement, state law enforcement, they all worked together to deport illegal immigrants that had a criminal record. And the Obama administration felt like it was important to get these people out of our country. But there was a clear message from the Obama administration. If you are in our country illegally, please, come back, apply for visas. You can come back and do it the legal way. The Trump administration has not been, they have cut the path to legal immigration down so severely to the point where that people, when they get deported, they're like, I'm never coming back. So if I'm here illegally, I need to fight to stay here. I need to do whatever I can to stay here. And I can understand that. The United States is the greatest country in the world, or at least it used to be. And I think it is. It still is. Our path to freedom, our path to the American dream, while it has been impeded, I think it's still possible. And that's more than you can say in a lot of countries right now. So I understand people wanting to be here. But I think that if everybody could have worked together on this, we wouldn't have seen the atrocities that we're seeing now. I think that also goes to ICE officer training. They're not taught proper gun safety handling. They're not taught what to do if civilians interfere. So a lot of these ICE officers are not fully trained, and they're just trying to do their jobs. But then when they have groups of people trying to interfere with their jobs or do things to combat ICE, they don't know how to react. So you get instances where these ICE officers are zip tying people, throwing them on the ground, shooting people. Like, it's just not exactly what I think should be happening. And I just think that this whole thing was done in a sloppy way. And I think the Trump administration is finally realizing that. It's way too late, in my opinion, because 2 people have died. but at least, I mean, they're realizing it now. Trump is rehauling ICE, rehauling DHS, moving people around, doing new things to try to combat and make things different and change things, to make sure that shootings like this never happen in our country, because they never should. But I think that, if we had these sanctuary cities, which honestly, sanctuary cities, I don't really understand what they're doing, because they are still complying with federal immigration policy, but they're doing it in their slow playing ways. They're taking criminals into their jails. They're saying, hey, DHS, ICE, you can't come in. Then they release these criminals back onto the streets, and then ICE has to go to these people's houses. They have to go to their places of business. They have to go to apartment complexes, and they're disturbing the American public in a way where people don't want to see this stuff. I don't want to be living in an area where I'm seeing my neighbor that I've known for years thrown out of their house, zip tied, thrown on the ground, and thrown in a truck. Like, I don't want to see that. People want law and order. It was very clear with this past election that people want to see law and order. They want to see things get cleaned up. They want to live their lives peacefully, and they want everything to look good and feel good. But they don't necessarily want to see it in their face. They want law and order, but they don't want to see it. It's a very funny thing, but that's what Americans want, is they want to feel safe, but they don't want to necessarily see it. Policing is a very violent, brutal thing. It's one of the hardest jobs in America, to have to detain people, arrest people, shoot people, kill people, protect people. It's a very, very, very hard job. But and it can also be a very ugly job. And I think that when it's thrown in the faces of Americans, it makes us uncomfortable. It's like when I go turn on the news and I see, oh, there was a shooting of 9 people by, this mentally disturbed person. It's sickening. I don't want to see it. But it's something that's happening. But again, it's not something that a lot of Americans want to see. And so when they're seeing constant news about ICE, about shootings, about brutality, it's going to bother them, and it's going to give them a bad taste in their mouth, and they are going to start to vote against it. As you've seen, President Trump's approval ratings have dropped significantly. I think people are very unhappy with what ICE is doing, and I think it's because there's a lack of cohesion, there's a lack of a plan, there's a lack of a message, and there's a lack of I don't know. I think there's just a lack of unity in how to solve this and how to move forward in the right direction. Whereas in 2012, there was a clear direction, a clear message to the American people. And, we weren't seeing crazy violence in the streets or American citizens dying. And I think, honestly, if I'm looking at this from a political lens, it's very smart what the Democrats are doing with ICE, in that they are not being extremely uncooperative, but they are not being fully cooperative, especially in sanctuary cities like this. And then when violence or things like this erupt, they point to it and say, this whole policy is wrong. This is not right. You should have voted for Democrats. You need to vote for Democrats because what's happening is terrible. It's a very smart political message. It's the reason why I think that the House will flip back to the left at the midterm elections, and it's what a lot of people are expecting to happen. And I think it is because of what Democrats, the game plan that they have for ICE and what's going on. Gavin Newsom is a very smart plan. I'm not a fan of his. I think what he did in California is disgusting. I think that he will eventually, if he does not become president, he may get indicted or be dragged before Congress because of the things that he's done in California with the misappropriation of funds and things like that. But his plan now is very smart. He's trying to distance himself from the state of California because he's not running for governor anymore. And he's trying to put himself in a national spotlight. And he's trying to pick on Trump. And he is the one politician I think has a good game plan for attacking Trump. His game plan is, I'm going to hold a mirror to this guy and I'm going to let him embarrass himself in what he's saying and what he's doing to the American public, instead of what a lot of these other politicians are doing, where they are fighting back and they are saying, stand up to ICE, pull out your phones, record, step in front of them, be violent towards people. That's not the answer. And I think Newsom is also putting himself in front of the public a lot, and he's taking this like moderate liberal viewpoint, which I feel like is missing from the world, because that I think was where I fall, is down the somewhere down the middle. But to take a more moderate viewpoint like Newsom, it's put him in a good position to become the candidate 28 for the Democrats. But he's also doing some things that can also hurt America. Like there was a conference in Switzerland that he went to, and sitting there showing knee pads to the American public, Trump's knee pads, or just doing things to undermine what the president is saying in front of, a lot of NATO allies, can be hurtful to the United States of America, because I think it makes the president look weak and it undermines him to the rest of the world. And we should all be rallying around our commander in chief, whether we like him or don't like him. In 2008, when Obama got elected, Republicans didn't like him, but they respected him and they rallied around him, and they did not go out of their way to disrespect him. I think the same happened when Joe Biden was president. At least in the beginning, I don't think that there was a lot of people going around and trying to undermine and embarrass the president of the United States in front of, our NATO allies, and that has changed. And I think it's hurt us as a society. And I think that the reason that is happening, and the reason a lot of this is happening, in terms of ICE and in terms of the way that Republicans are reacting to things, is not right either. Democrats and Republicans alike. Instead of just saying, okay, I don't like what the left is doing, let me come up with a problem, let me solve the problem. They say, okay, I don't like what the left is doing, let me go to the most extreme possible to solve this problem, and then it creates a new problem. And then the left has to go to the right and say, how do I solve this problem? Let me go to the extreme left to solve this problem, and then it creates another problem. So it's just, there's a lack of, okay, let's solve the problem and let's do what we can to unite together to solve an issue. Even if I disagree with Republicans, let me come up with a moderate solution that makes sense. Let me not go to the most extremes of the end of the earth and create a new problem, because it makes it very hard for voters, for people my age who are in their 20s, to understand, okay, who do I vote for? I don't like what Trump's doing with ICE, but I don't like what the left is doing to combat ICE's policies. I don't like what the left is doing in terms of education, in terms of fraud, in terms of things like that. And then, then you go back to the right and you're like, I don't like this thing. I don't like their take on abortion. I don't like, and so it makes it like, hey, who do we vote for? We have to pick the lesser of two evils. And that shouldn't be what politics should be. That shouldn't be what America is. America has always been built on hope, dreams, and the possibility of fulfilling the American dream of, starting off with nothing and turning yourself into something. And that has just gone by the wayside, to the point where we are so extreme to one end or the other that we have to almost just pick, and we're grossed out by what we're picking. I think we all need to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, hey, what can I do to help a situation? I think I do that with work all the time. I look at a lot of problems that drop in my lap from clients, and I say, how can I solve this problem? How can I make them feel good while also making myself feel good about what I'm doing? I think there's a lack of that. I think that there's a, hey, this is the message of the Republican Party, or this is the message of the Democrat Party. And I have to follow it if I want to get reelected, whether I think it's right or wrong. I feel like I have to fall in line. I think there's a couple politicians that are doing good and fighting the good fight. John Fetterman is one of them. I'm a big fan of his. He is a Democratic senator, and he is a very moderate. He takes a lot of moderate viewpoints. He takes a lot of actions against the Democratic Party when he feels like they are too, left leaning in one direction. I think that there's several others that do the same thing, but I think it's just this common ground where we're trying to get back to common ground, and that message is just gone. And it seems to just be a war and chaos. And I hope that changes. But it's not really showing signs of that. And I think that's why I want to get involved in politics. And I think that young people should start getting involved in politics. You want to see change, Go and make change happen, because it's not going to happen by sitting back and doing nothing about it. Anyway, that's going to be it for me. I covered a couple things. I hope I didn't give too much of an opinion left or right. I just try to be candid with all of you, because that's what I wish more people talked about on podcasts, talked about politically. Not afraid to share their opinions, not afraid to share what they believe in, and not afraid to make the world a better place. And even if you disagree with somebody, listen to why they believe what they believe in, because it will make you a better person, and it will make you understand how other people work and think. And yeah, that's going to be it. Thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.